So after reading some of the comments on some of the previous videos I've done for the 318, one of the comments was kind of operation, you know, what do all the buttons and knobs and levers do? So what I did is what I'm going to do is I figured I could make a video to show the operation of the 318 and what you would do prior to operating a 318. So I mean, if you've had a 318 for 20 years, no worries, this is probably not the video for you unless you just want to watch it. If you're new to the 318, this might help. I'm not really sure. So we'll just go through what I do prior to using my 318, and then I'll kind of explain all of the different operation procedures for the machine. What I do first, before I even crank it up, is I'll check the oil. Pretty easy to do that. And so it's kind of hard to do one-handed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, because I've already checked it, hopefully it's still, okay, so see, I can't, well here, let's see here. So what's really important about checking the oil is the Onan engines are actually, I mean, they're going to use some oil because they're a flathead design. So if you don't use 30 weight, there's the potential, any type of multi-weight, there's going to be a tendency to use a little bit of oil. John Deere actually has published specs on the usage of oil between oil change intervals. For over 50-hour oil change intervals on the P218, I want to say it's approximately 6 to 8 ounces, but don't quote me on that. I haven't looked at those specs in a while. One really important thing is if you look on the dipstick right here, it'll actually give you instructions that says check oil level, turn in tight. So what we have to do is to check the oil level, we put the dipstick in the engine and then we turn it in tight. Oftentimes, you know, there's some places or some dipsticks that don't want you to turn it in tight. And if you can see, I'm right on the add mark, which makes about perfect sense for this engine. I know it uses a little bit more oil than my previous engine. It's also at the end of its oil change interval. It's got 30 weight in it. And I think I need to change it around 925 hours, and I have 921 on the machine. So, you know, getting to the add mark, that makes about sense for this particular machine. After you check the oil, come back here and look at the sight fluid line for the transmission. My fluid's still a little high. I've been slowly draining a little bit out of it over time. I overfilled it. It should be in the middle right here. And then after you've done that, then you want to come up here. I like to check the air filter. Make sure there's no real big trash in the air filter. There doesn't appear to be. Anytime, because the pre-filter's oiled, you're always going to get a buildup of trash and debris right there at the air intake from where it comes up on the flywheel. That's normal. Once again, I can't stress, and I've said this in many of my videos, you know, the air filter has to have a pre-cleaner on it. If not, you stand a really good chance of dusting the engine. So, alright, control procedures. Now that we know that the machine's good to go, grease joints, just to step back a little bit, you know, grease the front spindles. So you want to grease here, grease the steering arm. There's not a grease zerk in the back attachment for the steering cylinder. Once again, grease zerk. There's some grease zerks on the brakes right here. And then there's some grease zerks on the drive shaft that you'll need to get every now and then. Levers to operate. So we have the split brake pedals here. The split brake pedals are kind of what has been termed a poor man's differential, locking differential. Because what happens is, say you're on snow or ice, what you can do is one tire's on a block of ice or a patch of ice and one other tire's not. You can separate the brakes. You just lift up this lever right here, and you mash down the brake on the tire that is spinning. So it works. You know, don't use turning brakes or the split brakes when you're mowing your grass or you tear up your grass, because it does stop the tire. Same thing with the locking differential. You know, you don't want to use that when you're mowing your grass. So for the most part, I keep mine in the lock position. Not really that big of a deal. Brakes, because it's a hydrostatic transmission, are rarely used unless you're going to emergency stop. So this is the speed control right here. You have neutral, which is right here. If you're going to move the machine forward, you move it forward. If you move the machine back, go in reverse, you move it back. With the brakes, there's a return mechanism, so if you need to stop quickly, it'll jam down, and it'll go back to neutral. It'll do the same thing from forward, just like that. Sorry about the shaking of the camera. And that will stop the machine. But generally, the machine can be stopped with just, so say you're going forward mowing, you can pull this back and it will slow the machine down because it's a hydrostatic transmission. Over on the other side, if we just look at the dash console itself, we have our lights. This is the PTO switch, and this is the throttle. As I've said in my other videos, you know, you can spend endless hours debating on where the throttle needs to be set. Anytime you're mowing or snow blowing, I would use wide open throttle, which is 3,450 RPM. The PTO, so this would be the front PTO. If you had a rear PTO, it would be right here. Basically just pull up and lift forward, and that turns the PTO on. Down here we have the choke for the engine, the ignition switch, and then we have the brake pedal right here. Over on parking brake lever, sorry, that's not the brake pedal, that is the parking brake lever. Over here we have the hydraulic levers. So you've got one lever that does not have a float, that raises and lowers the deck, and then the inside lever, if you push it forward, it does have a float, and that would be the hydraulic control for the front blade, which if we go up here and look at the front mount, we have two hydraulic outlets. One has float and one does not, as I just showed you on the hydraulic levers. You would want the float always to do the up-down portion of the blade or the snowblower, and then you would want the other hydraulic outlets to control the angle of the blade or any other type of attachments. The 318 also came with an optional rear hydraulic outlet. It's not installed on this machine, but it would go in line with the inside lever, I believe. The deck lift, and this is getting kind of a little more nitty-gritty than just controlling it. The deck lift is controlled by this cylinder here, which is the outside hydraulic lever. That cylinder right there either lifts the 3-point, and then it is also tied through this arm right here. It is tied to the deck lift mechanism, and so that's how the deck lifts. There was a question about a rear PTO. The rear PTO, and I'm not sure if you can see that, it would go attached to that shaft right there. A lot of people say that their 318 has a rear PTO, when in fact that is just the spline shaft coming out of the transmission. When the spline shaft comes out of the transmission, there's actually another electromagnetic clutch, and then depending on the rear attachment, there can either be a 2,000 RPM gear case, which steps the RPMs down from the 3,450, or there is something to deal with the material collection system. So that is the major controls of the 318 and kind of some of the big areas. Hopefully that's a little bit descriptive and makes a little sense.